My name is Xavier Eboli. I go by the name of Xavier because my father liked that name instead of Severio. So I've used Xavier all my life. I am the son of Tommy Ryan Eboli, reputed mafia boss, boxing manager, husband, father, friend. When he was about 15, 16 years old, he was pretty big for his age, and he was very good with his hands. He was a street fighter mostly, but he wanted to become a boxer. As most people are aware about boxing, in the early 20th century, boxing was pretty much dominated by the Irish. To be an Italian and want to fight, it would be tough. It would be hard to get fights. It would be hard for anybody to want to take a chance and put you on their card. So he took the name Tommy Ryan from a welterweight champion of the 1890s, I believe, and he used the name Tommy Ryan, which signified that he might be Irish. He started fighting about 16, 17 years of age against his father's wishes. My grandfather did not want him to be a fighter, and when he found out that he was fighting, he wanted him to quit. My father loved the sport, enjoyed it, was having a ball because he had won his first 10 fights, and he agreed to quit only if and when he lost his first bout. Sure enough, his 11th bout he lost, and true to his word, he quit boxing. But he stayed close to the sport, and as he got a little older, he got into managing. He probably started managing fighters in the late 30s. One of his early fighters was a young fellow by the name of Baby Sabin. He was an up-and-coming, promising middleweight, I believe, and he was good until the day he got hit by a truck crossing the street and had to have his leg amputated at the hip. From that point on, my father kept him on as a trainer and to work with young fighters and help them along.
But your father felt a certain sense of loyalty to him.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that he lost a leg didn't mean that he couldn't be part of the sport in some way. So as a trainer, he did very well. He worked with Tony in the early years. He probably worked with Vincent Gigante also. So boxing was an outlet, and it was a way to get these young fighters off the street, be able to provide for their families, and in most cases it was more than their own immediate family, it was their parents and sisters and brothers. It looks like the only guy's fishing on the lake today. They got a license. Well, on Greenwood Lake, on the south side over here, but on the west side of the lake, there's a little cove, and we had a log cabin in that area, and it was beautiful. There weren't that many people living here in the 1940s. South end of the lake, we had Brown's Hotel, which was a training camp for many championship fighters. And at the north end, we had Long Pond Inn, which was also a very nice venue for fighters to train at. And they'd come up here for the distraction mostly. Couldn't get in too much trouble here. They do their road work running alongside the lake, up and down the lake, and they had the idyllic country to bask in, so to speak. Whenever Tony was having a fight, or even Rocky Castellani, they used to come and stay at our house for a couple of reasons. One, my father would keep them out of the city, away from distraction. And two, he knew that they were getting their steak every night because my mother was cooking it for them. my mother used to cook liver and then wring the juice out of it so that they could drink the juice, which would give them the protein, without getting the cholesterol from the solid meat. So I was about 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, and I remember Tony living with us, and even entertained his fiancée, Lucy, who later on became his wife. Lucy was a lot of fun. She couldn't have been more than 18, 19 years old. Tony was, he was a fine addition to the house. And he was very astute and religious about his training. He followed the rules that needed to be followed. He did not create or look for any distractions. And my father used to treat him more like a son, I think, than like a contract of his. All in all, it was more than a business relationship.
You can see that. I mean, a fighter wouldn't have him as the best man if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, they were best friends. He was the best man at Tony's wedding. My Uncle Pat was one of the groomsmen. Rocky Castellani was another one of the groomsmen. A fellow by the name of Frankie Dapolito was also, I believe, in the wedding party. A young fellow who wanted to be a fighter but didn't reach the success that Tony did. And he was a contender that had to be gotten by in order to get to a title. Yet he never really got a title fight himself. Yeah. You know, at one time, Tony Pellone held a record for having the most main events in Madison Square Garden. Castellani, on the other hand, came to him from Luzerne, Pennsylvania, just outside of Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. When he got out of the Marine Corps, he was in World War II, fought on Iwo Jima, was the middleweight champion of the 1st Marine Division in the Far East. And when he got out of the Marine Corps right after the war, he turned pro. When I was 11, 12 years old, we used to walk together 1.5 miles, 2 miles after dinner at night. I would do road work with him in the morning. We would go up to the local high school and run the track. I would go to Stillman's gym with him if I wasn't in school or if I didn't have anything else to do. I would go into the city with him and go up to Stillman's gym. I've got some pictures of me being up there. And in general, he was a kid himself as well as being a professional fighter, and not that much older than me. 7 or 8 or 10 years, maybe, 10 years. So he had enough youth in him to be willing to spend time with a 12-year-old kid. And it was enjoyable. Yes, his stint in the Marine Corps led me to want to become a Marine also. When it came time for me to go into the service, and I was going in with a friend of mine, we were talking about Navy, we were talking about the Air Force, but when it came down to it, we had to be Marines because Rocky was a Marine. I was pretty proud of the fact. And Rocky came to my wedding in 1962. A bunch of friends of mine were there. A couple of them were officers in the Marine Corps. At least 3 of us were enlisted. And when he said all these guys were Marines. I said to him, I says, I think a lot of it had to do with you. You know? He was inspirational. He never talked about the war. He never talked about being on Iwo Jima. Didn't know about it until after he retired. But boy, I was really proud. I was really proud of him. I was proud to be a Marine. Waylon Douglas was a black fighter that he managed in the early 1940s, and never really amounted to a whole lot. He was a good club fighter. People enjoyed him. He put on a good performance. After he retired, over the years, I guess, I don't know how long it took, but he eventually went blind. And he showed up in the 1960s. He came to my father and he said he was blind, couldn't see, and he needed an operation. They might possibly be able to restore his sight, but he had no money. So my father took care of the operation, paid for it, paid for all his expenses, and sure enough, he did get his sight back. And he gave him a job working at the cutout record factory, warehouse rather, in Patterson. At some point in March of 1972, he had a plaque made with a bronzed boxing glove on it, one of his boxing gloves. And on the plaque it says, "To the greatest manager and my friend, Tommy, just Tommy." And it's signed, his name is engraved also, Waylon Douglas, in March of 1972, which was a gift that my father was very proud of. He never talked about the operation. He never said anything about having this operation done for Waylon. Then all of a sudden, you began to hear it. You heard it from other people. You heard many of the things that he did. I heard from other people, or in the one case that I was actually right there when he sent for a lot of money in $20 bills to give to the local residents in the village on Thanksgiving, so that they would all have a turkey. And he made sure that nobody went without a turkey. Vincent Gigante was a local neighborhood tough kid who wanted to be a fighter. Vincent was fighting around 1944, 45, and when he saw what my father was doing with Tony Pellone, he went to him and asked if he would teach him to fight, get him fights, be his manager, and build him a career. His career lasted 25 fights. He won 21 of them, and then retired. And he did fight many times on the undercard of Tony Pellone's main event fights.
Talk about the end of the boxing when, that moment in the ring where he goes after the ref.
He was passionate about winning fights and winning them properly. He was under the impression, he got the gut feeling that Al Weil had done something that was not right, that Al Weil had set this up with the referee to stop this fight and stop it unnecessarily. It does appear, if you look at the film of it, it appears like Ray Miller is pushing Castellani backwards to make it look like he's staggering. Rocky, the day after the fight, says I wasn't hurt. He told me, he says, it wasn't me going down. It was, he caught me with a lucky punch and did knock me down. But I got right up. I was ready to get back in the fray when the referee started pushing me backwards when he was wiping my gloves. He says, I couldn't believe it when he stopped the fight. And then when Dad jumped in the ring and went after Ray Miller, it was something that was unheard of in boxing up until that point in time. Today it's more commonplace than it was in 1952. Some of the entourages that enter the ring after a fight, it's enough to cause the ring to be surrounded by uniformed guards.
Right.
In around 1970, Frank Sinatra held a benefit show to raise money for the Italian American Anti-Defamation League at the Felt Forum. And after the Felt Forum, I had made arrangements for a table at the Copacabana for about 8 of us. There was me and my sisters and their husbands and some friends. Anyway, we show up at the Copa and the place is mobbed. There was a big crowd there. And I saw Carmine, who's the head maitre d', and I said, I got my table. And he said, well, he said, we got an unexpected guest, Joe Colombo, popped in on us, and we didn't have a reservation for him, so I gave him your table. I was very disappointed, but we hung around until a table was made available. Not as good a table as where we would have liked to have been, but anyway, a couple of days later, I get a phone call from my mother to meet my father. He was having dinner at Joe's restaurant on McDougal Street. So I showed up, and he was there with a few friends of his, and they were eating. He said, sit down. He said, you want something to eat? I said, no, I'm going home for dinner. I said, what's up? And he says, this thing that happened at the Copa the other day. He says, what happened? He says, why did you let them give the table to somebody else? I said, well, maybe if it was anybody else, I wouldn't have. I said, but I figured if it was Joe Colombo, well, then I guess I'll give the table up. I assumed I was doing the right thing. He says, no, you weren't doing the right thing. He says, when you go to the Copacabana, they got to treat you like they treat me. He says, and when I go into Copacabana, I'm a boss. And we don't have these problems. When a guy like Joe Colombo walks into the Copacabana and there's no table, they're not supposed to give you your table, give him your table. He's got to wait for a table, not you. I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I thought I was doing the right thing. Sometimes I don't know who to be nice to, who not to. So it was kind of funny, but he didn't think it was funny. He says, especially Joe Colombo, you don't give a table to.
Well, a lot of guys were upset with him at that time, right? Because he was doing all these rallies and stuff, and I think that upset some of the.
This was about 7 or 8 months before he got shot. In August of 1960, I was stationed aboard an aircraft carrier with a Marine detachment, and we were getting ready to go on a Mediterranean cruise which lasts about 6 months. And my last visit home, my father said, if you're going to Naples, go and see Cockeyed Johnny. Johnny was a friend of my father's while he was here in the States. He was deported in 1946, I believe. He says, go and meet Cockeyed Johnny, and he will take you to meet Charlie. I said, Charlie who? He looked at me, turned his head askance, and said, Charlie who? Charlie Lucky Luciano. I said, in all my naivete, you mean you know Charlie Lucky? and he said, it's humorous now, but it wasn't at the time. it was kind of embarrassing. Anyway, he says, yeah. He says, you go and meet Charlie. He'll be looking forward to meeting you. So when I got to Naples, I went to the Johnny's store where he made picture frames and sold them. And I introduced myself, and he was so thrilled to see me. So he said, wait till Charlie meets you. He'll be so happy to see you. So I said, oh, great. I says, I'm looking forward to meeting him too. So he took me to a restaurant in Naples where Charlie always made a stop at the end of the day. And while I was waiting for him, I had ordered a plate of macaronis. I was sitting there eating macaronis when he came in, and the head waiter pointed me out to him. He looked at me like, why is this Marine asking about me or for me? Let me go see what he wants. So he walked over to my table, sat down, and I introduced myself, and he nodded, and he said, oh, that's nice. He says, you were with them? I said, no, I'm not with them. I'm in the Marines right now, and when I get out, I'll find some way to make a living. I said, but no, I'm not with them, with my father or my uncle. And so he said, what are you eating there? I said, I played a macaroni while I was waiting for you. He said, don't eat that. He says, come with me. He says, we'll go get something good to eat. So he took me up to his apartment, which overlooked the Bay of Naples. And it was a magnificent apartment, so beautifully decorated, and the view was outstanding. So we had pasta with lentils. In Italian, it's called pasta lenticchie. And it was outstanding. It was delicious. It was probably the best I've ever had. And we had dinner many, many times after that. We went to the racetrack. We went to the theater, although I didn't understand much of it because it was mostly in Italian. My time spent with him was very relaxing, and it was nice to have somebody to go to and to spend time with instead of just running from bar to bar or store to store, as most servicemen do when they're on leave or shore leave. Every time I came into Naples, I would meet Charlie at Johnny's store, and from there we'd go wherever we decided to go. Dinner, track, theater, whatever. We enjoyed each other's company. He's probably one of the softest spoken men you'd ever want to meet. Makes it hard to believe that what you've read about him in the newspapers is real. However, who am I to say what he did or what he didn't do? It was a nice experience. when I tell people that I spent 6 months over a period of time with Lucky, it totally astounds them. They were very surprised that I would get to meet a man like him. It was good. It was good.